Hi, welcome to a brand new episode of Khāskurā podcast. I'm with you, Rama.
And I'm Anuja. Welcome.
Welcome. So, Anuja, what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about assimilation. It's a very heavy topic. We understand that. But yeah.
So, Anuja, can you please give me a definition of what assimilation means?
In academia, anthropology, sociology, assimilation is the process whereby individuals or a group of differing ethnic heritage are absorbed into the dominant culture of a society.
But since, our podcast is about giving you a peek to what it means to be an immigrant in America through our podcast, so we're going to put a little twist on it and we're going to talk about what it means to us and our interpretation of assimilation. And the reason we decided to talk about assimilation today is because when you come from one culture to a new culture, it is very important for you to assimilate, to survive, and hopefully to excel in that culture. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience, Anuja. Even when we were talking about this earlier, her experience and my experience assimilating in America has been very different. So do you want to talk a little bit about how your experience has been?
Yeah, sure. So when I first came to America to go to school, I went to Oklahoma. It's in the Midwest, and I went to a very suburban college town. It was called the city of Edmond, and I went to the University of Central Oklahoma. Everybody that went to UCO, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so my experience was not that drastic because when I moved to that college, there were about 450 Nepali students, and there were at least 150 to 200 freshman Nepali students. So I did not feel out of place in the sense that I was still speaking Nepali. I was, sharing experiences, just talking to people, and my roommates were Nepali. So it didn't hit me up until the point after a year when I started working outside of campus. I started taking more classes where there were fewer international students. And then I felt the punch where people were commenting things such as, oh my gosh, your English is great. You don't even have an accent. Like, how did you manage that? You're so cool. Like, I've met other Nepali students. They have such thick accent, almost like, okay, complimenting me, but also kind of insulting my community.
That kind of reminds me of a great point about how people talk about different cultures, and it doesn't have to be about your culture, but you kind of get offended, right? Do you want to elaborate?
Offended in the sense that, oh, you feel for them, like you can relate to people of color, immigrants, because you've shared some sort of experience. There's a common thread that ties you together. And when there's a person from outside of that community, taking a jab at it, it's kind of rude.
It's not pleasant.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. Yeah.
So I wanted to give you a little bit experience about my assimilation. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about your experiences?
Like I said, when there were people saying that, just because you don't have as much accent as your country people, like countrymen, like your fellow Nepali people, does not mean that they're any less intelligent. They're smart. There are people who, yes, they do have an accent, okay, but they are successful in life. They're doing really well. They're happy. And that's all that matters. Just because somebody has an accent does not mean that they're idiots.
Yeah. And in every culture, there can be shy people. It doesn't mean that they're not trying to blend in or not trying to respect the culture that they're in. The interesting thing is that when I was growing up in Nepal, everybody thought I was foreigner. That was one of our prank. I used to go to Tamil, which is this place where all the foreigners go. And I would mock them, how much is this in
an American accent?
I used to esko kati parsa, I used to do that. So everybody, when I was growing up in Nepal, thought I was foreigner. My parents had this ongoing joke about how I was adopted, which I wasn't, because my dad and me, we have a same birthmark, so confirmed. And so when I came to America, a lot of times people were, I always got this that I'm mixed. I'm not mixed. I'm 100% Nepali. My mom and dad are both Nepali. So it wasn't really hard for me to kind of assimilate. I think I've had a little problem kind of assimilating in work culture. First of all, I work in tech. And another thing I realized was that there's a lot of inside jokes when you are born and raised here. And since I wasn't born and raised here, I would miss a lot of inside jokes.
Yeah, a lot of cultural references.
Yes, yeah. So that was kind of like a general window to my experience. Assimilating in America is kind of important because, you know, it will help you understand the culture more. And I think that when I see a lot of Nepali people, especially kind of blending in their own bubble, I kind of think that it's not the best way to experience America, because there are so many opportunities and there are so many things that you can do with networking and everything, so which kind of comes hand in hand with assimilating. So we were also discussing about these two types of assimilation. Do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think any kind of information is power, and if you're able to reference back to these, you know, to American culture, and you are able to understand all these subcultures, pop cultures, whatever it is, you have the power of information. It's not that you're doing it to fit in. It's so that you can become a stronger person.
Excellent. Yes, excellent point.
Yeah. There are two types of assimilation that I think it works in the American context. One is principle-based assimilation, and the other is identity-based assimilation. So the definition that I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, I said assimilating into the dominant culture, right? But what I want to emphasize is you assimilate in terms of principle, meaning you follow the law of the land, you respect the Constitution, you be respectful, and you... So, for example, driving on the right side of the road. For example, not sacrificing animals
in your backyard.
in America.
Which has happened, right?
Which has happened. There has been so many cases. And so those are pretty much abiding by the laws of the country, and that's what principle-based assimilation means. But on the contrary, identity-based assimilation to me means that you are told to completely forget about your language, about your tradition, how you celebrate, like, and follow whatever the tradition is here. And that's not fair, because America as a nation is built by immigrants. We hear this every single day. Intellectually, it makes sense, but in practice too, it has to make sense, because besides Native Americans, nobody is truly like an American, you know?
Correct. Yeah.
Everybody's an immigrant, and that's totally fine. And that's why there's no dominant culture per se for you to forget your identity and come into.
Yeah.
So always remember that your culture is important, and you should not have to sacrifice your identity, because America stands for democracy and freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
The giant eagle, what is it, like
bald eagle?
Bald eagle, yes. And that is the whole point of our podcast too. And for us to cover this topic here is that you may be told otherwise, right? When you first come to America, we've seen, like in my experience, I've seen two types of people. One who are kind of like, they just live in their own bubble. And what happens is that a lot of time when you come to America and when you expect people to accept you, you also have to do the same. Just like, you know, people come to Nepal, they eat our food, they try to speak Nepali, and that makes us feel happy and we enjoy it. It's the same thing here, where when you come here, you have to kind of try to make friends outside of your own culture and try to learn more about other culture. Just because you're an immigrant doesn't mean that you live in this pod shelter where you only talk to your people, only eat your food, only like hang out with the same circle. And also not just the main culture, but there are other subcultures that you need to blend in with, right?
I think that because we're saying this because the more you understand other people and their culture and where they're coming from, the better you empathize. And empathy is powerful in bringing people together.
Yeah. And also, I think assimilation also touches this point about emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, I read this article by New York Times and it made perfect sense. It blew my mind. So assimilation in America is pretty much like having a big bowl of salad where each ingredient saves its integrity, its identity, its taste, flavor, and still is in a bowl together.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's not a melting pot. It's a salad bowl. Because
Agreed.
Melting pot, you'd be one big gumbo, But with salad, you're keeping your individual integrity.
And the more people you interact with, the more information you get, the more possibilities you'll be able to see, and it will help you. And we definitely want you to have that courage to go out there and talk to people, assimilate, and also maintain your identity, because you're unique, you're one of a kind, and more likely people will be more accepting towards who you are and your culture and everything.
Yeah, and from their perspective, they can also avoid the faux pas, like assuming things about you,
Yeah.
That way you're informing these people about yourself, and that way they are more empathetic when they meet another Nepali person coming to America.
And just show them how awesome you are.
Exactly.
So another point that I wanted to make in this podcast was about diversity and inclusion, right? When I was doing a fellowship, a decentralized consensus fellowship in Insight Data Science in San Francisco, one of the things that hit me after like 12 years living in America was that diversity and inclusion. And these are very different things. So when you come to America as a student, you'll definitely be introduced to International Students Club. And what I want all the international people to understand is that there's two type of inclusion. So this is kind of like the reverse assimilation of the people who have already here trying to accept you and assimilate with you. So diversity and inclusion, the first diversity means that they include diverse group of people, and inclusion means that they include you in the decision process. The example that was given was like diversity is that you invite people to the party, and inclusion means that you invite people to organize the party. And that makes a huge difference, right?
Such a huge difference. And you can see that if you watch like Jimmy Fallon or Late Night with Seth Meyers or Stephen Colbert, all these late night shows, they're still dominated by white men, but the fact that they have been including more diverse writers into their writers' room, the show has a different tonality, because now there's a voice, even though a white person is
delivering the joke.
Hosting the show.
Yeah.
The jokes are written by a diverse group of people, and it's so much more informed. Because if you compared shows that were like aired 10 years ago, they were completely different, because there was less inclusion.
Yeah, and we want you to know that when you assimilate, we want you to make an effort to assimilate, and also make sure that there has been an effort to assimilate you into their group. Don't be this token, right? There's a lot of times when I was doing projects as a consultant, a lot of time I was like the token woman, immigrant,
person of color.
Yeah, minority woman in the team, because some CTO wanted a woman in the team. Don't be that token. Be yourself. You are worth more, and make sure you're included. Your voices are heard, and you're not just like this, oh yeah, we want to have a Nepali people in our team.
just for the show of it.
Exactly.
And I think this applies to Nepali politics, Nepali workforce.
Everything, actually.
Yeah, because of casteism, there is a certain group of people that control a certain amount of things and positions in power. And I think that's where, I don't know what the updated constitution is. I think we need to read up on it. Any information you have on the new Nepali constitution would be amazing. And if you can send us a copy, that would be great too.
That would be amazing, yes.
Because we need to catch up on it.
Catch up on it, definitely. So Anuja, do you want to kind of wrap up our episode today? Like what is like the takeaway or conclusion would you like to give?
Yeah, so the takeaway is, number one, assimilation has a different connotation for America, because you don't have to assimilate in terms of identity. You assimilate in terms of principle. You follow the land. Like in academia, you don't cheat. You don't plagiarize. If you do source a different article, cite it, like reference it. For example, in the streets, like traffic rules, follow the traffic rules, drive on the right side, stop signs, 3-second rule. And do not speed, like all these
seatbelts, wear seatbelts.
Yeah, and this applies to Americans that, American citizens as well.
Yeah.
But all we're saying is this is a heads up and always try to like follow the rules.
Follow the rules, yes. While you were saying that, one of the big thing that I wanted to emphasize to all the immigrants is that I'm not saying that only immigrants do this, but I see this more in New York where there are more immigrant communities, is keep your community clean. Just like respect your surroundings, make sure things are clean. If someone needs help them, open the door for them. Just treat, like Buddha says, right? Just treat everyone the way you would want to be treated. And that will take you a really long way. So with that, we want to wrap up our episode today.
Yes.
Do you want to give them information about our social media?
Yes. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Please do.
Just hit the red button below and click the bell icon to get notifications. We publish our videos bi-weekly and it comes out every other Sunday. Also, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Khāskurā podcast, and we are on SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes,
Google
and
Podcasts,
and Google
We're
Podcasts.
Everywhere, guys.
We're everywhere, and the handle is Khāskurā podcast.
Podcast. Just look for us and follow us. And if you have anything you want to say to us, or if you want us to cover anything, email us at khaskurapodcast@gmail.com. So with that, we're going to wrap up our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
And namaste.
Namaste.